Coming up today on Wit from Whit Radio.
I can't think of a better way to professionally network than to also entertain people while doing it.
LinkedIn's resume singer Paige KEMNA talks going viral while thinking outside the box to get a job.
There are a lot of ways to get creative with how you can apply to things.
Plus,
I always recommend putting categories together and have scenarios for each of those categories.
business professional and career connector Toya Montgomery shares tips for how to ace a job interview.
Make sure that it's telling the story that you want to tell.
Wit from Whit Radio starts right now. Well, Dolly Parton has 9 to 5, Rihanna has work, and my next guest, Paige KEMNA, has her own job-inspired tune as well. It's called Hire Me, and a video of Paige singing the song went viral on the professional networking site LinkedIn. Check this out.
Persistence is my specialty. Creative and ambitious, an asset to your business. I bet that is what you want and need. Well, I will go the extra mile and show you that I'm worthwhile. Together we'll grow and succeed. So what are you waiting for? Hire me.
And Paige KEMNA joins me now. Hey Paige, welcome to Wit from Whit Radio.
Hi, how are ya?
I'm great. Happy to have you on today. How are you?
I'm having a great day. It's raining in Denver, but it's still great.
Yeah, for sure. So what has your reaction been to the popularity of your post?
Well, it's been pretty crazy because I released the song in January, and by February, it had been on LinkedIn, it's at about 950,000 views for just my post of it. But since then, other people have shared it and it's been viewed hundreds of thousands of times there too. So it's just it's inspiring to see all of these amazing people from LinkedIn and pretty much all of the other social media platforms that it's also been posted on. People are so nice. They've just been reaching out with words of encouragement and also job opportunities. So it's been a whirlwind for sure.
Cool. And did you have any expectations when you posted this?
Honestly, no. I had about 400 LinkedIn connections at the time, and I really expected it to go to maybe some of those people. And I also sent them to my parents because I thought that they would enjoy it. It was kind of on a whim. I really initially was going to release it on Facebook sort of as an entertainment piece. Mm-hmm. Well, LinkedIn is known for professional networking. I can't think of a better way to professionally network than to also entertain people while doing it. I released the song there too. And it was kind of a reaction to not getting a job in the past. So
yeah. And so why do you think people have connected to it? I relate to it. When I saw it, I was like, this is my life. What she's saying in here is everything I want to get across in an interview. But why has it resonated so well?
People want to show who they are in an interview or in a resume, but it's really hard to do that because paper resumes are sort of, it's kind of hard to attention grab all on paper. I think they liked what I did because I found a way to also kind of advocate for the kind of person I could be in a job, but also show who I was as a person. And I also made it fairly vague. So it wasn't necessarily about a specific employer, which was kind of nice for everybody else to relate to it because I wasn't focused on one specific direction. And I know that a lot of people reached out and they were like, we love what you did, but we can't sing or play the piano or do those things. But if you are really good at advertising, you could potentially create an ad that's specific to one employer. And that's a really cool way to grab somebody's attention. Or if you're a really good coder, you could potentially do something with that. I don't know anything about coding, so I'm not going to go into detail on that. But there are a lot of ways to get creative with how you can apply to things.
We see so many people whose videos go viral and sometimes they're silly, whatever it is. But what's it like to go viral? And this was kind of unique for it to be on LinkedIn. That's sort of unheard of, I feel like.
Definitely weird. Sharing stuff on LinkedIn makes it spread so fast. So it's if one person shares it, then other people like it and they find you. And it's just this crazy web of connections that you kind of create. Is definitely crazy and super fun. And I've made a lot of new friends because of it. That's something I did not expect.
And you've had some TV appearances too, right?
Yeah, that was actually a result of all of this. So I was contacted by some TV shows. Pickler and Ben is one of the shows that I was on recently, and that it's based out of Nashville, but it's a national show. I got to perform another jingle that I wrote for their show on television, and that was terrifying, but so fun in the end. It ended up being a blast.
What inspired you to write this jingle? And, was it frustration of job hunting, or what was kind of the inspo there?
Well, there was one particular job that I was really interested in, and I applied, and they got back to me, but they got back to me basically to tell me that they were going to keep my resume on file, and if anything were to pop up, that they would reference it. But for now, they weren't hiring. So I, out of frustration, was like, I just wish that people could sort of see who I was without having to just look at a boring piece of paper. And that's sort of what inspired me. It was like, I didn't get this position that I was really interested in. And I was at Union Station in downtown Denver with my roommate. I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm going to write a song about my resume, and it's going to be goofy. And she was like, you're crazy, but sure, go for it. And it took me, for lyric wise, 20 minutes to write the whole thing, because I was so just fired up about it. That led to the melody part. And it took me a day and a half to officially complete it and release it. So it was super fast.
What's your musical background?
I've been playing the piano since I was 3. So not in school, but a lot of my hobbies have kind of revolved around music. I did musical theater for a tiny bit in high school, but I was always the background choir chick. I was in an a cappella group in college, which was a blast. So I've definitely had singing and piano sort of in and out of my life since I was a little kid.
And then songwriting, is that a part of your life as well, I guess?
I've been songwriting for a while. I've been in a couple bands, but the resume song kind of spurred people to ask if I write jingles or songs for companies or brands. And now I'm sort of side hustling a little jingle writing stuff while I'm sort of pursuing my career. So that's so cool. And I'm humbled that people actually like what I did. So
the goal of all this, I would assume, is to get a job, of course. And so let's talk about your job search. I mean, what are you hoping to do?
I actually have an environmental science degree from my University of Denver, represent. But I wanted to do something a little bit different from that degree. I had already done 2.5 years before I realized that I was a little more talkative and people oriented than a lot of the jobs that environmental science would bring to my doorstep. So I put in my 2 weeks notice for my current job, my part-time job, because I have this jingle and content creation thing that I'm doing, and it's sort of like my own business. So it's so cool, and I feel like I can support myself with it right now.
Wow.
It's crazy though, because the resume song was intended to get me a legitimate professional job, and I don't have that yet. I'm still applying for jobs and talking to people. I just am looking for something to be I want to have face-to-face connection and communication with people. Those are my biggest, that's basically at the forefront of what I want in a job.
Gotcha. And what would you say you've learned about job hunting from this whole experience?
Oh, man. Well, if there's one thing I've learned, I think there's this weird reluctance to get creative with how you reach out to people and get attention from employers and recruiters and stuff. And I want people, I think, to recognize that if you do have something cool about yourself that you can use to convey how creative or how fitting you would be for a position, there's no harm in doing it. In addition to the traditional route, I think it's good to put your creativity into it or your skills into it in however way you can.
Finally, today, I'm going to let you share with listeners how they can connect with you online. Where can they find your video and that sort of thing? Where are you on social media?
You can follow me on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel, but it's very basic. I don't have a ton of stuff on it yet, but I've had interviews and songs that I've written for news outlets on there, which is really cool. And that Pickler and Ben interview. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. That's kind of like where that's where you'll find me most of the time. Like Twitter and Instagram as well. My Twitter is just at Paige KEMNA. And my Instagram, which I'm on all the time, more of like a personal thing, but it's really fun. I like to do stories and keep up, and I'll goofy sing sometimes, but it's at PAJAY_K. And that is where you can find me.
I want to wish you all the best with your job hunt, and congrats on the success with this Hire Me song. And Paige KEMNA, thanks so much for being on Wit from Wit Radio.
Thank you so much. This was a blast.
Creative and ambitious, logistically auspicious. That is something I can guarantee. Well, I hope you find this brilliant, but focus on what's relevant. I think you could use someone like me. So here's my grand finale. I hope you enjoy, or better yet, employ this girl and her strong but silly theme. Thank you, and I hope you consider me.
All right, and before I move on to the next segment, I do want to give an update because since I spoke with Paige, she announced on LinkedIn that she has landed a new job, thanks in part to her resume song. So congrats, Paige, that's awesome. Now, when it comes to a job interview, there are certain practices to follow and certain mistakes to avoid. It can be a tricky process, but if you know the do's and don'ts, you can work to build your interviewing skills. Joining me for a Wit from Wit tidbit on this topic is business professional and career connector Toya Montgomery. Toya is the owner of Charm Consulting and the executive director of Relate Marketing in Cincinnati, Ohio. She joins me now over the phone. Hi, Toya. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So the goal of this segment, I really want listeners to learn how to ace a job interview or give them a good idea of how to do that. And so, before we even get to the interview, there are steps like, of course, applications. And when you look at an application, you're going to see all of these qualifications. And so how can I decide if I'm qualified? Because sometimes it's a little bit clearer than other times. I mean, sometimes you'll see must-have qualifications versus preferred qualifications. So what are some deciding factors there?
I always tell people if you have at least 75% of what is noted on the job description to apply, because it's not job to eliminate yourself. It is your job to make sure that you are qualified with the basics of the position. So for instance, if it's a customer service position, you want to have some customer service to bring to bear. And if you do have the basis of what they're looking for, that other 25% that may be, very specific, you don't necessarily have to have if they feel like you can do the job.
Moving on to resume. Of course, when you submit your application and when you go in for an interview, you've got to have that resume. And a resume, it's two-dimensional. It's on paper, but it's got to be impressive. So what are recruiters and employers looking for?
With a resume, it really depends on the position that you're applying to. So for instance, I've had developers do really crazy and exciting things. I had one developer who did a Mario game for his resume. So it took you through a segment of the Mario game that shows his development skills. He could go anywhere he wanted to go. If you are looking for a position where it has any type of digital aspect to it, I would highly recommend having a digital resume where you have gone on to a Weebly or one of these easy, quick websites and created a resume that can showcase your talent, what you're bringing to the table. A lot of journalists will do that so they can showcase some of their stand-ups and things like that. But anytime you can bring a third dimension to your resume is very helpful. If you are just, looking for a position that doesn't require any type of digital or any visual aspect to it, I always recommend that students will format their resume in a way that is clean, that you leave some white space, and you only go to the second page if you absolutely need to. If you don't have enough to fill the second page, I typically recommend staying with just the first page. I always say put the most important things at the top. It's almost like the upper third, I would say, of your first page, because that is the page that's going to either make or break their interest in bringing you in for an interview.
As far as preparing for an interview, you've got to do research. You've got to figure out what to wear, practice your talking points. I mean, how can you ultimately just nail your preparation?
Obviously, you need to do some research on the company. You need to know who it is. Don't have confusing points about, oh, well, I thought you guys did this, and then the reality is that's a completely separate company. Make sure you're researching the right company. Another thing that you can do as far as researching is just find out who are the people that you're meeting with. Do you know any of them? Do you have any connections to any of them? Maybe there's someone else that you went to school with or worked with in the past that knows somebody else that is making the decision. That always helps in terms of interviewing and being considered for a position.
And what about practicing talking points?
I always recommend putting categories together. So if you think about the basis of the job description or what it is that they're looking for you to do, there's usually a few categories that job falls under. So you want to put those into categories and have scenarios for each of those categories that you can bring up really quickly. You don't have to think long and hard about it. It's going to be second nature to you because you've done the research right, before your interview. It might be leadership. It might be business relationships. It might be communication. So you have those three categories. You pull together some scenarios of different instances within your different work environments or school environments, and you put those into those categories so that they're quickly there in your toolbox.
Phone interviews are typically the next step, or Skype interviews. You have the chance to have your resume there with you and even notes and that sort of thing. So how important are phone interviews?
Phone interviews are very important because they can make or break your opportunity to go in for a face-to-face. And with phone interviews, it's very important that you come across as enthusiastic about not only the company, but the position, because they want to know that you're excited, that you have a lot of energy to bring to this opportunity and be able to really add value to their organization. So one, I would say be very enthusiastic. Two, I would say you want to make sure that you're succinct and to the point with your answers, because on a phone screen, they can get lost in your answer and all of a sudden they didn't hear anything that you said. And then thirdly, I always recommend asking the question of, is there anything else that I could cover for you that would help you understand better how I would be able to be a good fit for this role? And that will let you know if you missed something. That gives you a last opportunity to close, to basically say, hey, that means that you're bringing me in for a face-to-face. I also recommend asking about next steps so that you are not following up prematurely, but you know what the expectation is for continuing to the next stage.
And what if you don't get an interview ahead of time and just get kind of called out of the blue? Should you take the interview right on the spot if you feel like you're prepared, or should you take a minute and reschedule?
No, I would never allow anyone to catch you impromptu for a phone screen. It sets you up for failure. It shows a lack of planning on the recruiter's side. If they ask to do it and you feel like you're prepared to do it, go ahead, because that will speed the process up. But if you're not prepared, absolutely not, because they are not going to give you any type of handicap for the fact that you didn't get to prepare.
Typical interview questions. What should someone expect?
Interview questions can range from just tell me about your background to more behavioral questions. You really want to use your tools online like salary.com and Glassdoor. They will give you a sense of what the interview questions are like. If the company is more of a behavioral company, if the company has some other structure around the way that they do interviews. And some people have a hard time with behavioral questions. So that's why I recommended putting them into those categories to where you can pull those answers out relatively quickly.
Right.
And you don't have to try to think about the answer right then and there.
And so, how do you handle maybe a tough question that gets thrown at you that you aren't necessarily prepared for, and you feel like maybe you've started answering it and you want to start over? How do you go about doing that?
It's just like, oh, I was on Family Feud. So I liken it to my experience on Family Feud, where you can pass, right? And go to a question that is easier for you to answer. It's okay for you to ask the interviewer, hey, can I pass to a different question and come back to that one when I can think of a better answer? That's completely okay to do. If you feel like it's something that you just really are not prepared to answer, you can say, I haven't had a chance to research that, but I would like the opportunity to go back and do a little bit more research on that particular area. But you definitely will have to nail all of the other questions if you have one question that you're going to fail to answer.
And what about the awkward salary question that is sometimes brought up?
I recommend asking the salary question early, because if you're going in for a position that you think is paying $40 an hour and you find out it's paying $20 an hour and you're not interested at $20 an hour, it's a complete waste of time of yours as well as the recruiters. So although a lot of times people don't want to ask the salary question, it's very important that it is asked before you go to a face-to-face, because if they can't afford you, there's no point in you doing that interview. Another piece of that salary question is being willing to have a range that you would give that you would be comfortable with, because when they ask you that range, they are going to want to stay within that range. So you want to make sure that it's well researched, that you have done your due diligence to make sure that it's something that you could live with if they offered you something in that range.
Classic interview mistakes to avoid. What are some that come to mind?
Lying, that's a big one. Don't lie. They will bust you in the lie because you won't remember what you lied about. Getting names incorrect. If her name is Tina, call her Tina. Don't call her Tracy. Another one would be just making sure that you're dressed appropriately, that you're not wearing a shirt that's too short for women, or I know for men, especially, sweating is really big with interviews. So making sure you have the right kind of deodorant that's going to be able to get you through to the end, because the last thing you want to be is the stinky candidate that's remembered by that. Right?
Yeah. And then from a personal experience here, I know last year I had an interview where the employer took me out to lunch. And I felt like the whole time I was trying to balance eating the meal that he was paying for and then answer the questions that he was asking. So what would be some advice you could give about, a lunch or a meal interview?
When you have a meal interview, the important piece to remember is to not have the meal direct your interview. Instead, order something that's going to be easy to eat. Order something that if you don't eat it, you could take it with you on your way, and you can eat it afterwards. Because your most important point of that interview is to make a good impression on the person on the other end. So sure, you want to take a few bites, but you don't want the meal to be a reason that they don't want to hire you because you ate and you had horrible manners, or you let stuff get all around your mouth or anything like that. So you just want to take the minimal amount of bites until you get through the meal, take it with you, and then you can scruff it all down afterwards. But during that interview, take that time, get to know the person, find out more about what the position is, and tell them about you.
Questions to prepare as a candidate. At the end of the interview, you're going to get asked, do you have any questions about the company or the position? What's kind of a general good question to go with?
A general good question is, what is the timeline for filling this position? So that way you know what to expect afterward. Another good question for after the interview is, what are the top 3 things that you're looking for in this person? What's most important for this role? That way you can kind of tie that back to, oh, okay, these are the 3 things they said that they needed. These are the 3 things that I would say are my strengths. This is a match made in heaven. Is there any reason that you wouldn't recommend me to move forward in this process? And that's a good question because it puts the recruiter on the spot to tell you if it's their decision. It also puts the recruiter on the spot to let you know what they thought about your phone screen.
Beyond giving strong answers and having a good resume, how can candidates stand out or really make the right impression? I mean, what sticks with employers?
Well, I always think it's important to know someone. So, any and every way you can find someone that knows someone, or that can put in a good word for you is always a good thing. The other thing that is a way to stand out is to be very well spoken. Make sure you're not using a lot of likes and ums and just use the closed mouth and silence. Although it feels like it's a long time, it really isn't that long. So if you can be eloquent in the way that you speak and be concise, answer the questions, I always tell people to ask, did I answer your question? Just to make sure that there's not a piece that's still out there or kind of lingering.
And you were talking about connections. What is your advice for making connections during a job search? I mean, LinkedIn is out there, of course. What's good to do there?
It's important to go and meet people in person. People want to know that you're real, that you're genuine, and when you go to a networking event or environment where you can go and meet someone and they can have good things to say about you, that goes a long way, especially in a world where everything is online. When everything is online, sometimes you get lost in the black hole that is the internet. And if you don't have some type of connection to the person that's doing the hiring or the resume reviews, it just sometimes falls flat unless you're absolutely a really great fit for that position.
Post-interview, what's the proper way to follow up? A thank you note? I mean, what's the right amount of time if they don't tell you, you'll be hearing back in X amount of days? How do you handle that?
I recommend sending a physical thank you card afterward. When I was in third-party recruiting, I had a hiring manager say to me, I don't know if I like that candidate. They just sent me an email, thank you. They didn't send anything physical. I had to coax that person into doing a face-to-face meeting after for the follow-up because of an email thank you. So you really want to think about, some people are very traditional, so you want to send a physical thank you card and make sure it's handwritten, no scratch outs, showcase that deliberate thought that you've put into it. And I think it goes a long way. If you're applying for a creative position, don't be afraid to send creative thank yous, whether it be a box of lifesavers that says, hey, I look forward to being a lifesaver on your team, or whatever that may be. And then in terms of following up, I would say that follow up is usually depending on the position, but I would recommend a week to 2 weeks just following up with a phone call or an email to say, hey, I am checking in with the places that I've interviewed with, just trying to get a sense of my timeline. Is there any, update that you can share with me at this stage in the process?
And my last question for you, Toya, what would be your overall advice or maybe words of encouragement for job seekers out there?
For job seekers, I would just say keep going. Make sure that your resume is crisp. If you've had one person look at it, have another look at it. Make sure that it's telling the story that you want to tell. Because if something's on your resume and it's not helping you, it may be hurting you, and you want to find it before it does too much damage.
Well, Toya Montgomery, thanks so much for being on the show. This was really informative.
Thank you, Whit, for having me, and keep at it. You guys will land that great job soon enough.